Thank you. So, morning, of course, it was a general discussion. Now we have actually planned three sessions on the data protection regime. One is what I will be doing now. Mr. Ranganath was not able to be present, so I will be substituting for him. And then we will be having a session tomorrow by Nagendra on obligations and then Rajesh on another aspect of compliance. So three sessions have been uh, planned, out of which today I will speak more about data protection and right to privacy in terms of how this has evolved as a law in India over the last few years. Yeah. Okay. So the Indian position as far as privacy protection is concerned, actually we know that constitution originally did not make a specific mention of the right to privacy, but we were actually deducing from various Supreme Court decisions that under Article 21 of our constitution, privacy is being guaranteed in Indian constitution to the people. Because Article 21 reads protection of life and personal liberty would not be deprived for any person except according to a procedure established by law. So this was supposed to be interpreted in various Supreme Court decisions to impute the availability of privacy right into this particular uh, say section. What we are seeing is what we call as the Zoom bombing and other things. Somebody is sending arrows here, so let us ignore that.
Navi sir,
Yeah.
somebody is scratching on the screen. You
Yeah,
just
yeah. I think
disable the annotation.
some child must be doing it. One of the participants.
Please disable the annotation
And
in your settings only.
in my settings,
Disable annotations.
actually, it is not in my this thing. It is in some other co-host kind of a person's this thing.
We
Because
also can do it, sir. It is not coming here.
uh, in my this thing, annotate is there, but the main host is there. No, I think the main host will have. He can.
Yes, yes. I'll ask him to do it.
You ask him to uh,
Yes, yes, yes,
disable it because I am not you going to use any annotation myself. Okay.
yes.
Yeah. So if you look at the legal aspects, way back in, okay, I think some of my this thing is not. Okay, let us continue and enjoy this art. Okay, so way back in 1954, the Supreme Court had an occasion to make a comment on whether privacy has to be imputed into the Indian constitution. And it was held in this MP Sharma versus Satish Chandra case that at present India does not have a specific provision in the constitution and there is no need for a strained construction to import the US concept into the Indian constitution. So with that, things were going on until, say, the Karak Singh case came and see, if you see both the earlier MP Singh case and Karak Singh case, both are cases where there was a criminal and the police were trying to take some action kind of a thing and therefore in fact, first one was a case against Dalmia Group. Actually, a district magistrate had issued the warrant also to search and that was questioned and whether the police had got this right to search, whether the magistrate has got the right to give a warrant. whether it will affect privacy was something which was perhaps discussed there. I don't know, at that time the concepts of privacy was perhaps not fully developed. Today when we talk of privacy protection, we talk of protection of privacy of individuals. Um, so that was MP Sharma case. Some of you may go into that details once again, but that is has very little relevance as of now. Now, Kanak Singh case was again the case where police wanted to have some kind of an interrogation or a visit rights to a criminal, and the Supreme Court said that you cannot do that in the particularly in night times. Home should be considered as a kind of a protected abode. So unauthorized intrusion into the person's home is actually a violation of the privacy. This was the concept which was there in Kanak Singh case somewhere around the 1960s. In 1990s, again in this Rajgopal case, it was again stated that the right of privacy is implicit in the right to life and liberty guaranteed in Article 21. And some kind of an explanation was also given to the explanation of what is privacy by saying that it is right to be let alone. And this right was supposed to safeguard the privacy of a person, his family, certain intimate information about himself such as marriage, procreation, motherhood, etc. So these were some of the things which were prevailing at the time when this Rajgopal decision was there. Subsequently, also, a question had come in this 1972 case of Malkani that what is the status of a telephonic conversation, whether it is protected under privacy. This discussion still goes on because the Telegraph Act permits the tapping of telephones subject to certain precautions. One of the things the Supreme Court stated in this particular case, which is of interest to us, is that the protection is not for the guilty citizen against the efforts of the police to vindicate the law and prevent corruption of public servants. So here somehow the judge took the right stand that we should not think too much about all these fundamental rights and other things when it comes to the criminals. In fact, you know that most of the common people in India think that most of these fundamental rights exist only for criminals and terrorists, and a genuine person is never given the same kind of hearing. So this perhaps recognized that kind of sentiment way back in 1972. Then we come to the Puttaswamy judgment, which is the watershed moment in the privacy legislation in India. We call this as Puttaswamy judgment because Justice Puttaswamy was one of the petitioners in this case, challenging the use of Aadhaar as let me see whether I can at least cancel all these things. Okay. In the annotation.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, you need to go there, view options. There is a tab. View options, the drop down you click, sir. Okay. Then you should get that annotate there. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Please, sir.
Okay, fine. So this Puttaswamy judgment was a case where the Justice Puttaswamy actually is from Karnataka. He had filed a case against the government for use of Aadhaar and stating that the use of Aadhaar is a violation of privacy. So this went to the Supreme Court, and while the discussion was going on in the first instance, the Attorney General made a statement that we should not worry too much about fundamental rights because privacy is not guaranteed as a fundamental right in India, and he quoted this MP Sharma case. So at that moment, that bench of I think 5 judges stopped the hearing and said that we will have to clear this aspect first and we will refer to a larger bench because MP Sharma bench was 8-member bench, so they felt that this 5-member bench holding the hearing of Aadhaar was not having the rights to say disregard this MP Sharma case statement. So then it went to the full bench of 9-member judgment, and then before the then Chief Justice retired, they gave a very detailed judgment on whether privacy is a fundamental right in India. Ultimately, this judgment held that this MP Sharma judgment is overruled. Right to privacy is in fact an intrinsic part of Article 21. It is a fundamental right, but it is subject to the reasonable restrictions which are anyway available in Article 19. 2. So this statement was made by the Supreme Court at that point of time. Yeah, we are having too many technical issues today. Yeah. Now, this particular judgment, therefore, meant that in India, the government, which is the custodian of the fundamental rights, cannot pass any legislation or an act where right to privacy is not properly protected. This was one of the general understandings we take from any of these fundamental rights or constitutional rights issues. But this discussion did not remain to this, though this basically was meant to be a guidance to the central government that there has to be a due process of law whenever the privacy has to be infringed through any other laws, whether it is Information Technology Act or Telegraph Act, etc. Subsequently, in one of the cases in Kerala, the High Court, which was passing a judgment in Oman Chandi case, made an interesting observation that the newly recognized fundamental right to privacy should be not only used against arbitrary state action, but also it should protect the individuals from the actions of other private citizens, including press or media. So by making a statement like this, an important High Court actually extended that Puttaswamy judgment, which held the privacy as a fundamental right, is also a guidance to the private sector. Okay. But anyway, the government was asked to pass a robust privacy law, and under that assurance, the Aadhaar got its clearance, and since then, the government of India has been working on bringing a legislation. What they did was immediately after the Aadhaar was passed, wherein the government had given an assurance that India will have a robust privacy law, because that was a fundamental foundation on which the particular clearance was given to the use of Aadhaar under certain circumstances. But then they had the Sri Krishna Committee. Sri Krishna Committee gave its report in 2018 along with a copy of a draft bill. It went into the parliament, but parliament term was over. Therefore, a new bill was presented in 2019 December, and that is what we are today discussing as the Personal Data Protection Act. Now, though this Puttaswamy judgment is considered as a landmark judgment on privacy, ultimately when we look at the final decision, one thing which we see is the judgment did not actually clearly define privacy. The one-page final order, which was signed unanimously by all the people, only said that this MP Singh judgment is overruled. Privacy is a fundamental right, but what is privacy was not contained in the final order. So, if you are a company or if you are a legal professional, ultimately this question of what is privacy still remained even after this particular important judgment. Okay. However, in the individual portions of the judgment, different judges expressed some views which actually to some extent throw some light on what the judges thought privacy was. The definition of privacy, which was in the minds of various judges, was reflected to some extent in the individual portions of the judgment. Of course, Justice Chalmeshwar made a statement that there is no need to resolve all definitional concerns, that is about what is privacy, at the abstract level to understand the nature of the right to privacy. He said it is enough if we say privacy is to be protected, but I will not tell you what is privacy. We will leave it that as a definitional uncertainty. He said definitional uncertainty is no reason not to recognize existence of the right to privacy. So his view was that I will recognize the right to privacy, but if you want to know what is right to privacy on a case-to-case basis, come back to the court, which was of course impractical from the point of view of say business. Say business cannot act without understanding what is the right to privacy. Fortunately, Justice Chandrachud portion of the statement actually gave a sort of a clear definition about the privacy, and he reiterated the old adage that privacy is something which is a feeling of being left alone. So privacy in a simple sense, Justice Chandrachud said, allows each human being to be left alone, and that is something which is inviolable. We need to protect it, and that is what is called the privacy right. He also made a statement that in the current age of information technology, every aspect of the lives of a particular individual is governed by technology. Therefore, whatever we try to do in terms of privacy protection in the physical world, if we don't do it in the interconnected world, which is the digital space, then we will not be doing justice. Therefore, he said privacy should be protected even in the digital world. That is what he said. And therefore, and also he said the dangers posed to liberty in the digital world are something which we need to take special care. Now, having said that, Chandrachud again went further deeper into the definitional aspect, and he also made the statement that the notion of privacy derives from the assumption that all information about a person is a fundamental way his own for him to communicate. So this ownership of personal information is still something which we are debating. In fact, at least some people, including Justice Sri Krishna, in one of the places he made a mention that I would not like to treat the information as if it is a property which is owned by a person. It is not, it's a relationship, he said. That is just like you say, I own a building, I own property. You cannot say, I own the personal information. So he felt that this concept of ownership is not much relevant. In fact, that is why our Personal Data Protection Act uses a completely different kind of relationship definition when it comes to the person whose privacy is being protected and the organization which is collecting the personal data. Internationally, we use two terms called the data subject and data controller. We say that data subject has got certain personal information. He hands it over to the data controller under a certain consent or whatever is the arrangement. And the data controller uses that particular personal information based on the consent which has been handed over to him, that it should be used for such purpose, it should be kept for such period, then it should be done like this kind of instructions which are there in the consent. So the relationship is one of a data subject giving instructions to the data controller through a document of consent, which is more like a contractual instruction, where the data subject instructs the data controller to act in a particular way. Now in India, because Justice Sri Krishna took a view that this concept of ownership is not a great idea, he used a terminology which is different, which actually distinguishes Indian law today from any other law like GDPR and puts it a shade above the GDPR, because it says that data subject, we will call him as a data principal, and the data controller, we will call them as a data fiduciary. He used the term fiduciary to define the organization which takes control of the personal data through a consent mechanism and uses it for a certain purpose. Because the word fiduciary is used, we are today looking at this organization. That organization may be a company, it can be a partnership firm, HUF, it can also be a government, it can be a trust, it can be an NGO, it can even be an education institution. So they are all data fiduciaries who work with the personal data of people, either because they provide any service to them, or sometimes some of the big organizations have employees. Employees' personal data also is part of the privacy protection regime. So this data fiduciary is like a trustee for the data which the data principal hands over. So this concept of data principal and data fiduciary, which is used in Indian Personal Data Protection Bill, which arises out of Mr. Justice Sri Krishna's view that this personal identity information cannot be called something like a ownership data, actually created a completely different system of relationship between the data subject and the data controller. What it meant was that the responsibilities of the data fiduciary were taken to a completely different level of a trustee. It actually gave a certain duty to care in the data fiduciary, so that if the consent mechanism, which is otherwise the fundamental base of all privacy protection, if it is not good enough, it is weak, either I don't have proper definitions there, and we say all consent should be informed consent, that is the person giving the consent should know exactly what he is signing. In India we have got language problems, and privacy policies are many times actually written by experienced lawyers. They will use certain terminology which the ordinary man in the street is unable to understand. So when he takes a mobile application or something like that, and before he wants to continue, a screen comes and says, unless you say I accept, I will not allow you to give the service. At that time the person has got no patience to even read the consent. So presently the consent regime, on which a lot of emphasis is being given, in practice it is actually a farce. Now what Indian law has done therefore is that while consent we will retain, we want a written kind of an agreement between the data principal and the data fiduciary. Because you are a fiduciary, you are like a trustee, you should know what is good for the data principal. The objective of the act is to protect his privacy. You decide whether you are protecting his privacy or not, whether the consent mechanism is properly worded, whether the person has actually understood it properly, they become secondary. So this actually is creating a duty to care to the data fiduciary. It appears to some extent be a particular thought process which perhaps Justice Chandrachud has not emphasized here, because he has used fundamentally his own. He says it doesn't say it is actually his own, but he says fundamentally in a way it is own, and therefore he should be able to use it, or how it can be used in the way he seems correct. So that is what Justice Chandrachud actually mentioned. And he said that there are many situations in which the data subjects, the individuals, actually will be required to provide the personal information in expectation of some valuable service. So in such a situation, this notion of privacy has to be taken into account. He also made some very interesting observations. He said that data has got three important characteristics. One is it is non-rivalrous. In the sense, we say something is non-rivalrous in the sense that if I have the data and if you want the same data, it is possible. Say in a physical this thing, if I have got a pen and I'm writing, and if you say, please give me your pen, then if I give it to you, then I will not have. So the ownership or possession of the pen is in a way rivalrous. That is, either you can have it or I can have it. Data is not like that. I can have it, you can also have it. So that is the nature. Therefore, when we talk of privacy, the information may be with multiple persons at the same time. This is one of the issues to be dealt with. The second is, it is of course not easily visible, in the sense that it moves across at lightning speed on the networks. So before you know, your privacy data is with 100 other persons. He also used the terminology called recombinant. What it meant was that the data can be aggregated, taken from one source, the output from one source becomes the input for the other source. So these are the characteristics of the data, which we are trying to look at and use it for the protection of privacy. Because of this judgment, in which Chandrachud brought in the relationship between the need for privacy protection in a digital world, we are now today talking of a terminology called information privacy. So what we are trying to protect is, I don't know whether it is protecting the privacy of the individual, but I am trying to protect what is called information privacy. What is information privacy? Information privacy is a terminology which is in a way trying to explain that protection of certain information leading to the protection of the privacy is what is possible, and based on which now we are talking of this data protection law. So information privacy is protecting the information relevant for privacy. Okay, then this is of course this law is under still consideration. In between, even in 2019, a discussion came up in this Ritesh Sinha case, where again it was reiterated that the Puttaswamy judgment considers this as a fundamental right, but it is subject to privacy, to reasonable restrictions. Now this concept that it is subject to reasonable restrictions, I am emphasizing again and again, because in the process of our discussion with the government today on the modifications required for the data protection bill, which is currently the JPC is meeting experts and trying to understand what needs to be done. There are a lot of other organizations, including supposed to be organizations who know everything about this, like the NASSCOM and others. They seem to have a different viewpoint. People like us have a different viewpoint. We have the privacy activists on the one side who say that I want privacy protection irrespective of what else happens in the country. So even if there is a terrorist holding a gun, I don't want to know who is the terrorist. That is because I value privacy to some extent. So you have got one extreme kind of privacy activists who say that privacy has to be protected against any kind of other rights. I'm sure many of the legal professional people hold that view. On the other hand, we have got the technology people doing business. For them, privacy protection law is a hindrance to exploiting the data for business. So they are at the other end and they say let there not be any privacy protection. Let there be free transfer of personal data. NASSCOM says that why should we call financial information sensitive information? Why should we call health information sensitive information? It even goes on to say why should we call Aadhaar information as sensitive information? Let us drop all this from the definition of sensitive personal information. It also says that let us make it easy for information to be transferred across from India to any other country. So, on the one hand, they say that all this critical kind of information like finance, etc., which we know in cybercrime situations, that is what is creating a problem. They say all that should be made non-sensitive, and at the same time, free transfer should be allowed. This is one viewpoint, which is the extreme viewpoint from the industry side. People like us try to balance these two. In fact, I had a recent interaction with the Joint Parliamentary Committee just a couple of days back, in which this came up very strongly that there are people who support privacy at any cost, there are industries who want freedom at any cost, but what we need to understand as techno-legal persons, both the lawyers in this forum and the technology people in this forum, that we need to find a middle path. Definitely privacy is an important fundamental right, but at the same time, if there is a clash of interest, you have to yield to the other argument. And many people know that we always say that my right to privacy or my right to stretch my hands stops at the nose of my neighbor kind of a thing. So that is what we have to remember when we study this data protection regulations. So because of this kind of extension of Puttaswamy judgment to the data and the need to regulate the choice of how a personal information has to be used, we now today stand in a situation where this human right concept of privacy comes, the responsibility for that shifts to the IT persons, where the concept is processing of data for a particular business. The two have to find a way to manage this particular dichotomy. Okay. Now, people in the industry, in the information, they have heard of the term called data privacy. Now, basically, in data privacy, we were talking of data as an inanimate object, zeros and ones. What we meant by privacy was maintaining the confidentiality of that data. That was one. We also had a concept called data integrity. Data integrity means the information, if it is altered or modified, there has to be some way of finding it out so that data is reliable for use. If I have got a data, whether it is correct or incorrect should be there. So that is data integrity. Nobody should come in and make some changes. The third concept of information security is making data available for decision making as and when it is required. There is a data, it is meant to be used. If it is not available, we say denial of access. So these three concepts of confidentiality, integrity and availability, which we consider as CIA principle, this is what the industry is familiar with as the concept of information privacy. But what has happened now is the data protection laws says that your objective in data protection, okay, is to protect the privacy of the individual. Now, in order to protect the privacy of the individual, if there is data in the form of information, electronic information, if that has to be protected, definitely CIA principle is relevant. But that CIA principle I am talking of for protecting the personal data, not for the entire data. So CIA principle or the current understanding of information privacy becomes a subset of privacy protection, because the privacy protection will not only have this element of protection of data, it will also have certain other features like obtaining a consent, giving a notice to the person, giving him some rights. These are some of the essential features of the Data Protection Act, which we will elaborate later on. So, privacy protection through data protection is a larger thing compared to the information security. That is why we say in industry, if there is a need to protect privacy and you want a privacy officer, or we will call him as a data protection officer, he will have to have some freedom as far as the information is concerned. But what happens in the industry was until today used to having an information security officer who was protecting not only personal data but also non-personal data. So for him, if he say that personal data, which is a subset of whatever you are managing, will be taken out, I will have a second officer who will be looking at it, but that second officer will be more senior to you, is something which the information security industry is yet to understand. This is the reason why data protection professionals need to be properly guided to ensure harmony within the organization. So I sometimes say that this personal data is like hazardous chemicals. If there is an inventory manager in a manufacturing industry and suddenly the company starts a new production line for which hazardous chemicals are coming in, and the company CEO feels that our current inventory manager is good enough, but this hazardous chemicals inventory should be managed by another expert, and say I will create a second designation for that. This person should not feel that I have been managing all the inventory of this company for several years. Now suddenly you come and say that this particular commodity, I don't know how to handle it. That is the kind of situation we are now having. Personal information, which is a subset of the total information, will be secured by a separate person called data protection officer, and the current information security officer is considered as perhaps not ideally suited. There will be conflict. So this is why I say that a new career opportunity is coming up for data protection officers. Okay, but as I told you in the morning, this being left alone is a state of mind, difficult to know what is the state of mind and difficult to know how to secure it. That is why we ultimately boil down and tell the data principal, I don't know what is your choice, please tell me what is your choice. I will try to see that your information is managed in that particular manner. That is what we call as exchange of consent. In the industry, most of the time, instead of the data principal coming up and say, I am giving you my data, please process it like this, the request will come from the company saying that I want your personal data, I will give you this kind of a service. So like in the contract, particularly on the internet sometimes, instead of an offer and acceptance, there will be an invitation to offer. The recipient will look at the invitation and then sends offer from his side, and the website gives the acceptance. So similarly, in the case of the privacy, normally a notice is first issued by the company saying that I want your data and this is my offer. And this person will say that I agree and therefore I am giving you the information. So this exchange of offer and acceptance happens in the form of a notice and a confirmation of that. This is what we call as informed consent. So it is this informed consent through which companies will understand what is the intention of the data principal and then set technical controls to meet that requirement. But inherently in this process, the right of privacy always has a conflict with the right to information. So privacy versus RTI is one of the conflicts which we have to resolve. Privacy versus security is another issue to be resolved because the government has a legitimate interest. Today morning, Dilip was talking about this, that police are not considered to be persons who are good for privacy because they always are asking for more information. They are putting up face recognition software in CCTV footage, and they know anything and everything about me. When I walk through the street, police will know that I am walking through the street. Okay, but the question is that street is a public place, and if I walk through the street, I am actually interfering with another person's public space. So obviously there is some regulation which has to be there. So police are always coming into conflict with such kind of issues. So privacy versus security is an eternal debate. Privacy versus RTI is another debate. because of this, we always have to be finding a balance between multiple rights. This is one of the challenges which we have in the privacy area. Now, a question will come that if you say privacy is a fundamental right, what is the nature of the right to security? Should I have a government which does not guarantee me security? Then why should I have the government? I can live in the olden forest days that might is the right kind of a thing. Today we have elected a government because we expect the government to protect me. Therefore, I am not supposed to take law into my hands. So security is an obligation of the government. It is the duty of the government, and as a citizen, it is my right to demand that the government has the security. Now, is that security as fundamental as privacy? Is something which people should debate. I personally feel that privacy will come only after the security, because if I don't exist as a citizen, where is the question of my privacy right being guaranteed? Okay, anyway, that is something which some of you may disagree with me, but that is my fundamental way of thinking, that privacy has to find a balance with security, otherwise it is not a fair game. Okay. Now, when we talk of this right of choice, and we say that okay, the data principal will give me some information, and I will manage the information as required, there is one issue which we have to look at. Now, a data principal or any individual knows some information about himself, but it is not that he alone knows everything about himself. Somebody else looking from outside may also know some information about the person. So there is an information which is known to the persons, known to self. If it is also known to the others, we call that as a public information. There is no point in our data protection law trying to protect that, because it is already in the public domain. So public information normally is out of the personal data protection regime. Now, there is something which is known to me, but it is not known to others. That is the data set which is subject to the main personal data protection regulation. Within this, I may say that something is confidential, I don't want to give it to anybody else. Something I have already released to public, and I don't mind releasing it to public again if it is required. But there is another set of personal information which I can share conditionally to the data fiduciary. In fact, all our discussions of Personal Data Protection Act runs around what information can be collected under this conditional sharing. So basically, this is one set of information which the data subject knows and he wants to share it. Now, in the set of information which the data subject does not know, there are some informations which the criminals could have stolen. Okay, I don't know whether it is available, and sometimes they may know more about me than myself. So that is one thing. Now, the Data Protection Act normally doesn't address the criminal aspects. It is left to the laws like Information Technology Act. But anyway, law addresses the issue of stolen information. In India also, ITA 2000 will address it. Personal Data Protection Act will not much address the criminal aspects of data theft, because already there is another law doing that. The second aspect is the surveillance by the government. The government is also watching me, and it is collecting some information. I don't know what is the information which they are collecting. Now, the Personal Data Protection Act recognizes this and tries to put some kind of a limitation on government surveillance. So, in a way, that is also part of the Personal Data Protection Act. Similarly, companies do what we call as profiling. Profiling is basically observing your activities and trying to build on that and predict what you are going to do. Okay, that is what we call as profiling. It may be in respect of your purchases you have made on Amazon and other things. It may be your political behavior, whatever is that. So, conditional sharing, surveillance by the government, and profiling by a company. These are the things which the personal data protection regulation in any country will try to address. Now, currently, there is this Information Technology Act 2000, amended in 2008. So the version of 2008 is the central piece of legislation in India which regulates the privacy protection. Of course, guided by the privacy judgment, which is the Puttaswamy judgment. There is also the Indian Telegraph Act on the one side, talking about how privacy can be perhaps infringed in terms of telephone communications. The Aadhaar Act has got its own thing, and RTI Act is there. But central piece of legislation which today regulates privacy in India is Information Technology Act. We should not say that there is no privacy law in India, privacy protection law, data protection law in India, because data protection law exists in India. That exists in the form of Information Technology Act. It exists in the form of Section 43 capital A of Information Technology Act, which says that any body corporate handling sensitive personal information has to follow reasonable security practice. And Section 79, which says intermediaries have to follow due diligence. The term due diligence also is part of Section 43A notifications. There are other additional sections on data retention, Section 67C, powers of the government for surveillance under Section 69. So therefore, there are several things which are already available in Information Technology Act, which cumulatively try to protect the privacy and data protection. Unfortunately, people have not recognized it as such, and therefore we have an issue as if there is no act in India. Now in the coming days, it will be Personal Data Protection Act, which will be the central portion of the legislation. It will be, of course, continued to be supported by the privacy judgment for all interpretation purposes. It will be supported by the Information Technology Act 2008 version, and after the Personal Data Protection Act comes, Section 43A will go out of Information Technology Act, so there will be a new version of Information Technology Act 2020, assuming that 2020 is the year in which Personal Data Protection Act is passed. If it is not passed during this year, it may become PDPA 2021. Then correspondingly, there will be a new version of ITA 2000 in 2021. So that will continue to be there. Then there is another very interesting legislation which is coming into India, which is called the Non-Personal Data Governance Act. As I was telling in the morning, the moment we identify some data as personal data, it actually has to leave something else which is not personal data. What is not personal data is non-personal data, and since the government has got a separate mechanism to look at the misuse of non-personal data, which is again done by ITA 2000. After taking care of the security of the non-personal data, after taking the security of personal data in the PDPA, the residual part of non-personal data is available for harnessing the economic benefits. So, unlocking the benefits in the non-personal data is one of the objectives the government is thinking, and it also there is a thinking that we need to have something called open data, that is certain data every citizen should have a right to know, and some kind of data which the government collects should be considered as a sovereign asset of the government, like a natural resource, which the government should have the right to use it in the manner it deems fit. So there is a lot of things which this non-personal data regulation can achieve to add value to the data in general, and that regulation will come, and when it comes, that along with personal data protection and ITA 2000 together will be the legislation which will be governing the data, whether it's personal, non-personal. Today I have put personal data as a bigger circle, ITA 2000 as less. That doesn't indicate what is more important or something like that, it is contextual. Additionally, this Indian Telegraph Act will remain, RTA Act will remain, Aadhaar Act will remain. So the privacy regulatory scenario as it is emerging should be looked at in this whole scenario. I will take questions at the end of the session. Let me complete this. I am sure there should be a lot of questions. Now, apart from this, there is what we call as sectoral privacy regulations. some of you who are aware of the global developments, you know that while European Union adopts this GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations, as a regulation to protect all kinds of data, and within that tries to say this is health data, I have to give more value for that protection, financial data, I have to give more value for protection. That is why we have some kind of data which GDPR calls a special category of data. In India, we call it as sensitive personal information. So that kind of data is also part of the regulation. US has adopted a slightly different approach. Basically, historically, it has come like that. They have protected the data through regulations which are sector specific. That is, health industry has got what is called HIPAA. There is a act called GLBA for finance. There will be a separate law for children's online privacy protection. So there may be a separate law for driver's license information. So like that, there will be multiple sectoral laws in USA. So in India, so far we didn't have any specific laws. ITA 2000 was there, and we also said that after Puttaswamy, we have now been drafting a general privacy protection through data protection law, which we call as the PDPB, or which will become PDP 8 2020 if it is passed. In between, there are several sectoral privacy regulations which have come through notifications. For example, if you take the financial sector governed by Reserve Bank of India, which is banking and say payment systems, okay. SEBI, of course, controls one part of the area which relates to stocks, stock trading. Rest of the finance information goes to the Reserve Bank of India. Reserve Bank of India has been having certain regulations which are ideally recognized as information security guidelines. In fact, way back in 1980s, when Reserve Bank of India first permitted banks to use computers, there itself security guidelines for computerization was introduced. Subsequently, when Information Technology Act 2000 was passed, Reserve Bank of India came up with Internet Banking Guidelines of 2001, which had some aspects of law as well as information security. Then when Information Technology Act was revised in 2008 and became effective in 2009, Reserve Bank of India again went into the modification of its information security guidelines for banking and came up with what was called Electronic Banking Security Guidelines under the Gopalakrishna Working Group Committee recommendations, which is like a Bible on how banking information has to be secured. Subsequently, we have what is called Cyber Security Framework in 2016, which has given a lot of information on how the payment systems information has to be secured. But all these things were basically aimed at not necessarily data protection, but cybercrime prevention. So, though for preventing the cybercrime, there was a need to protect the identity of the banking customers. To that extent, it was personal data protection. The regulations never mentioned it like that. It only talked about the prevention of cyber crimes through various measures. Very recently, in 2019, RBI came up with a regulation which is called the Data Localization Regulation for Payment Systems. That is, any financial data emerging out of the payment systems, which is your UPI data, credit card data, and other things. The Reserve Bank today says that that data has to be in India, it cannot go out. In fact, it's a very strict guideline. All the discussions we are having today on personal data protection regulation, where the industry is trying to get it their way of a free data flow, is not supported by Reserve Bank of India's guideline, which is very strict data localization. So in fact, the Personal Data Protection Act, if it adopts the current version of section 33 and 34, not section 33, 33 and 34, then they will be directly opposing the Reserve Bank of India guideline of data localization. I hope that will not happen. We are expecting that the Joint Parliamentary Committee will perhaps revert the data, which is called restrictions on data transfer. Okay, that's section 33. They may revert it back to the 2018 version, or they may introduce some other means. I hope so. Anyway, okay. So, in which case, data localization of RBI will have to remain. Otherwise, there has to be some kind of a harmonization of the Data Protection Act and this RBI Act. In USA, many times we get this kind of conflicts between the federal law and the state laws. And there is a general principle there that wherever there is a conflict between the federal law and any other law, whichever is stronger will prevail. So in that sense, suppose the guidelines of RBI is stronger than what the Data Protection Act specifies, probably the regulations of data localization for the financial sector or the banking sector, which RBI manages, should prevail over some of the provisions of relaxed data transfer permissions, which the Personal Data Protection Act may be forced to have in its regulation. So there is of course enough provision to incorporate that through the DPA, that is Data Protection Authority's regulations. I hope that will be done like that. When we come to health
how
sector,
long it will take, sir?
Pardon?
Still, how long it will take?
In your this thing,
our schedule, it was up to 1:30 only.
Yeah.
We are already 2 o'clock.
Oh, we are already at 2 o'clock now. Okay.
Yes,
Then perhaps I will wind up in the next 5 minutes. Okay.
Yes,
Whatever
please.
is left out, we will take it up later. Okay.
Yes.
So, apart from financial sector, health sector has got its own regulations through the Ministry of Health. Then a new act was also thought of, but it did not materialize. Government is working on what is called National Health Stack. So health sector, a lot of things are being thought of. Aadhaar has got its own regulations. TRAI has got its own privacy guidelines, which is a comprehensive code which covers everything which is there in the information technology in the Personal Data Protection Act. So that is another sectoral guideline which we have to keep it in mind. Similarly, the insurance sector has got IRDA information security guidelines. So therefore, there are several sectoral guidelines which have to work along with this Personal Data Protection Act, and in future we will also have certain sections of Information Technology Act which will remain, and that will be the overall canvas with which the whole regulation will be worked out of which, of course, this Non-Personal Data Protection Regulation Act will be one of the most important regulations to watch out. So, if you just summarize the privacy protection regime which has emanated from the Puttaswamy judgment, we have currently the Information Technology Act, Section 43A, which is imposing the concept of due diligence, and this concept of due diligence extends to what we are discussing as Personal Data Protection Bill today. And later on, when PDPA comes, that will take over. Different aspects of PDPA will be discussed by my friends tomorrow when we discuss the obligations as well as compliance issues. So that is where I will try to end today's session. I hope we will be able to go deeper into certain other aspects in tomorrow's edition. Okay. So if I have extended it so much, then probably there is no time for questioning.
No, sir. We will have one or two questions.
Okay. Yeah.
Sir, one question is, what if the privacy of an individual is questioned as part of investigation? The same got leaked, and at last the person was found innocent. Who is ultimately liable for this loss?
The Department of Police have been given certain powers of collecting the personal information without consent, etc., because as a part of law enforcement. But this Personal Data Protection Act does not exempt the police or any other department from security aspects. That is, I allow you to collect it, but this leakage, they have to take the responsibility. So that there is no exemption in Personal Data Protection Act. Therefore, the police also will have to ensure that they will not let this leak out. So if it leaks out, then the person who has suffered a damage can make a complaint and try to recover personal damages. That is one side. Apart from that, the Data Protection Authority may put administrative fines on the department up to 5 crores. Okay, that is what the law says. Okay.
Sir, the second question is, in the light of the right to privacy, what is the problem in making Aadhaar mandatory? Why there is oscillating policy by Government of India?
See, Aadhaar is an instrument through which certain government services are made to reach people. Okay. And that exemption is available in Personal Data Protection Act. Similar exemptions are there in GDPR and other places where national identity, if it is to be used for public good, there is exemption that it can be used. Okay. Again here, as I told you in the police, security is still the responsibility of the Aadhaar authorities. And also the other departments which provide use Aadhaar. See, most of the time, whatever Aadhaar related data leaks have been reported so far, they are leaks not from the UIDAI server. Suppose, let us say, your KLE college is collecting the Aadhaar of all your 10,000 say students and is holding in your database, and somebody hacks into that. That is not the responsibility of the Aadhaar authorities. So most of the leakage is like that. Security will still be the obligation of everybody using the Aadhaar information. So that obligation will continue. Failure to that is open to administrative fines. Misuse of that will be covered by the Information Technology Act as a crime.
That's right. Sir, this is question from my side.
Yeah.
Few of my research scholars, they are working on new technologies like blockchain and spectrums. So what is the present situation of the government about these technologies? Because these are new technologies worldwide, so we want to know about it.
No, whatever is the technology, if the technology is used in a particular manner in which the privacy of the individual is breached, obviously it is not acceptable. Now, we talk of artificial intelligence for profiling today and big data. Now, if information is anonymized and used for big data, there is no problem. Okay. Personal data which is used for profiling by an artificial intelligence algorithm is definitely within the Personal Data Protection Act. According to Information Technology Act, any automated action of any machine or a software is attributed to the owner of that software. Therefore, the person who owns that AI algorithm is responsible for privacy protection. Now, blockchain is a different concept. Say, in the blockchain, people say that I am actually providing privacy by using encrypted identity of a person. So, if that encryption is good enough, then there is no privacy violation. But if encryption is not good, then the same question will arise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it.
No bar on use of technology. In fact, PDPA even provides for sandbox arrangement. New technology startups can gain 3 years exemption from all privacy regulations and work on technology.
Excellent input, sir. Very nice inputs from you. In the morning, we have also come across 2 of the new technologies you have mentioned. Of course, it has raised some interest, and I also browsed it. One is on the homomorphic encryption. Really a very excellent solution required to the modern world. Sir, in today's session, 2 sessions were discussed. One by Mr. Pawan Kumar on the Internet fundamentals, where we came to know about different things about Internet and the present scenario of the Internet. And from you, sir, Vijay Shankar, sir, it was an amazing, a wonderful session for the engineering graduates like us, because we very seldom talk about the law, about the privacy content. But in the modern classes, we see that students ask these questions to us. Like in IoT, what is my privacy? Or what is my data security? What I should do? Sir, it was an excellent session. I thank you for giving this session, and also Dr. Pawan Kumar for sharing his knowledge. Thank you, and thank for the organizers for giving me an opportunity to moderate these two sessions.
Thank you.
Over
And,
to
Thank,
Ganesh.
regrets
thank you,
for having
Elisami sir.
delayed your
Thank you
lunch.
very much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Navi sir.
Yeah.
One announcement to all the participants. First of all, let me thanks to all the participants for being with us on this platform till the last session of today's. Feedback, because we are getting repeated messages about the feedback, link of feedback. So tomorrow, after the completion of all the sessions, during the validatory session, we will be releasing the feedback form. So you have to feel that. Okay, so in between we will not be sending. So please take the note of this, and thank you once again to all of you, and see you all tomorrow. See you all tomorrow. Madam, is there any instructions to the participants from your side?
I thank Navi sir specifically, especially, and